Greetings and welcome to another Stompy 51 miniature adventure. Today we're going to talk about my Gladiator collection, those which I've painted, those which I haven't painted, and that part will be a bit of an unboxing, and also about a game called Jugular by Studio Tomahawk. Now there's obviously something deeply morally dubious about Gladiators, but it still holds a certain interest for us, and you can see here, I think even these days people recreate what it was like. And I remember reading a lovely little book on my commute many years ago about the Spartacus War, which basically taught me two very broad things. First of all, the Romans wrote about Spartacus from their angle, so we don't really have anyone inside his camp, so we have no real understanding of the exact details of what went down, just what the Romans saw went down, and from that we just know it ended very badly with lots of crucified gladiators all the way down the Appian Way into Rome. But the other thing I learned was, it was all a bit more nuanced being a gladiator. From our perspective, from the perspective of kind of class struggle, this was slaves fighting for freedom, which obviously they were. But actually, slaves, gladiators didn't have such a bad life compared to what the expectation was of life at that time. So, you're a barbarian in the Roman view of the world. Yes, you fought Rome, you've been captured, you're from a military society. In any case, you're already a warrior. Your life expectancy, all things being equal, may not be that more than 30 years old anyway. You get taken to Rome, you get to fight for glory, you get to be a warrior. You don't normally end up fighting to the death in most rounds. You spend most of your time being hired out, as a kind of a heavy in all manner of kind of gang warfare. You have great healthcare. You get fed every day, and many freed Romans want to come and become, this kind of football star, global megastar type gladiator themselves. But I don't know if that's just revisionist history trying to make it all a bit different, and basically at the end of the day, who wants to be fighting people to the death in an arena? But again, I think what we're learning is you can't project backwards with our current sensibilities. But anyway, but if you want something kind of short, sweet and fun and recent, have a listen to this episode of A Short History Of on the Gladiators, which includes a kind of dramatic escape story around Spartacus and what happens to him. And of course, if you want something that is just full of gore and all manner of things that shouldn't be shown before the watershed, obviously you go for Spartacus Blood and Sand. So let's start off going through the gladiators that I've actually managed to paint over the years. I'm no expert on the different types, but basically we've got the Dimachus. They've basically got two swords, and it's a tricky way to fight. This fellow is a dwarf Dimachus from Wargames Foundry. And this one is, they obviously took one of the Coppleston castings, big hairy ancient German heads, and put it on a, I think, Mamillo body, and gave him two swords. So we've got the actual Hermann, the German over there. And he did quite well for me in the game the other day. We like him. Then we have two, I believe they're called Secators. Means follower. They're offensive, and they use a gladius, these swords, and a heavy shield. And their helmet was designed so that if someone tried to chuck a net at them or try to grab it, it wouldn't be that easy to grab hold of. But because heaven forbid that should give them an advantage, it has tiny eye holes, which means they can't really see exactly what they're doing. And I hope you'll recognize the entertaining little feature on the shield over there. I read about how the Picasso bull, brought down to its simplest essence, is used in training Apple engineers. You know, they hand them apparently on day one a Samsung like 1990s remote control with 50 buttons on it, and they say, you know, this is a failure of management and design because all the engineers couldn't agree what was needed, and so everyone got what they wanted, and so every single button under the sun is there, and people only use 4 buttons. And you shouldn't do this. You should keep it simple. And this Gladiator keeps it simple by just sticking it to the jugular. And so there you go. And I think he's Crusader and he's Wargames Foundry. This fellow over here is a Veles, also called the Hastarius, very lightly armed gladiator based on the skirmishes of the early Roman Republic, protected only by a small buckler. Okay, well, whoops, I'm the one who stuck on this giant square shield. Should have been a small shield. I probably should have read all of this before I pulled them all together. And he relies on his agility, really. And that's a spear from Fireforge Games, because I quite like their plastic spears. They're less bendy. I think you probably should have a thinner spear. Then we've got the Cripularius. The existence of the Cripularius is not historically proven. Tacitus mentions it. Appeared in Gaul. And he's basically very heavily armoured, but can barely see what he's doing. And he didn't do too well for me yesterday because it was quite easy to chuck a net over him, which immobilised him a lot. We've got the Scissor. Guess why he's called the Scissor? And he's supposed to be paired up with the dude with the nets, the Retarius. And he's supposed to cut through the net for the entertainment of the evil baying crowd with that scissor-like thing. And he's pretty well armoured. And here we come to the Retiariuses. The Retiarius is a classic gladiator with their nets and their trident. And the idea is that they kind of dodge about you because they're not too heavily armed in the heat. And they dodge around the heavily armed fellow, dodging around, jabbing, poking, irritating, getting them to get sweaty and hot and worn out with exhaustion. Then they chuck the net on them, and then they stab them with the long trident. And I think a variant on it was to give them a spear, which you can see I've done here. That was the Retiarius, and now we're going to talk about the dude in the middle. Then we've got the Thrax, presumably after the Thracians. And they have this double-edged kind of curved sword, which mimics the Rhomphaia or the Falx, which I think is a kind of curved scimitar-like sword I think the Dacians, the Romanians, used. But he seems to be a light gladiator. And then we've got two forms of, I think, heavy gladiator. I've only got one example of this one. He's a Murmillo. And they always, well, they often tend to have a fish kind of modelled on their helmets because they're supposed to be tiered up with the Retiariuses who chuck their net. And they're a heavier gladiator, equipped with a shield similar to an Imperial Scutum. And again, I probably should have read all this before deciding what shields to give them. So he should have a much bigger shield, but you know, it's close enough. And a short glaive. His helmet was often used as a grip point by his enemies. Oh, isn't that evil? They gave him a big helmet to make it easier to kind of kill them, but hey. And then looking at the images, even though he is a classic Murmillo, I think, I'm willing to be told otherwise, that he also is a Murmillo, and he's a Murmillo with no helmet on, which kind of makes sense. So he conforms more to this image because they've got their big scutums and their short glaives, and he's obviously decided to take his helmet off in protest at being given a helmet design to allow you to grab both ends. Well, it does say that these helmets were also for offensive capability, which I imagine means you just nut your opponent with this kind of sharp helmet when they get too close. So actually these must be Murmillos, and these, well, he's probably a Murmillo with a small shield. And again, oh, maybe, so it's the person who had this before me, because I bought that one second hand. So that probably should be a big shield. Am I going to rip it off? Probably not. Oh well. Maybe it's been worked out differently in this local arena. And then these are, well, so the question is that a Murmillo? But the thing is, that helmet, as I understand it, with the kind of the two feathers on either side, is generally, I think, a Hoplomachus helmet. And the Hoplomachus is based on a Greek hoplite, and the spear is the main weapon. They have a round shield, but they also seem to have a bit of a sword with them, a short sword with them. And I think once they've chucked the spear, they put out their short swords. So I'm not sure if he's a fellow who's using that, having already chucked that. I'm not really sure what this little dwarf fellow is, what he's supposed to be. I had fun doing a tiny bit of research to find what to put in his shield, and I think that's the symbol of the god Baal, or rather it is underneath there, with some blood dolloped on top of it. Blood from the blood god by Games Workshop. And this is a dude with a rope called a Laquarius. It's not based on any historical mythological figure, and he's got a lasso or a whip. So he's kind of like the Indiana Jones of the Gladiator fraternity. And so that captures his opponent, and then he stabs him with a sword once caught. So actually, I'm not sure who thought this through. So he's supposed to have a sword rather than a spear. But, you know, hey, the Roman Empire was around for a long time, as were gladiators. Maybe they're just playing with the genre here. I'm now going to take a moment to turn to a lovely little rule set by Studio Tomahawk for playing Gladiators called Jugula. And I played a game or two recently. It basically involves your miniatures, some cards, and an 8x8 board designed beautifully like this. Not mine. Let's just say that mine was pretty rudimentary, but it worked. I'll probably put sand on it, except I'm worried it'll all just flake off. Now, if you want a proper in-depth explanation as to how to play Jugula, go after this video, of course, and go and listen to Ralph Astley, who gives a beautiful, detailed explanation. But I'll have my quick, high-level summary now, just to whet your appetite for blood. So the way it basically works, in summary, is you choose 4 gladiators. Every gladiator has a card. The cards show the healthy side of the gladiator, and then the side after he's been wounded over here. And obviously, as you can see, the stats go down, obviously, once you're wounded. You only get 4 gladiators. You get a hand of cards, and the more the crowd is excited by you and what you're doing, the Vox Populi, the voice of the people chart, the higher that is, the more of these cards you can hold in your hand. I think you start off being able to hold 5, and it goes all the way up to being able to hold 10 if you get the crowd to the dazzling heights of 10 Vox Populi. And every turn, you can play one card. And with the card, you can either say, I'm going to move the number of gladiators next to the foot. This is very complicated. It's not really. So there you can move 3 gladiators, 4 gladiators, 2 gladiators. That's what you say. I'm going to move 3 gladiators. And the gladiators can move the maximum of the number on the top right, but it's easier to move straight forward, and I think it's 1 to move straight forward and 2 to move in any other direction, because as the rules say, it's not a dance floor in the arena, it's murder on the dance floor in every sense. You can fluff the crowd, as they say, get them all excited, and I don't know what you do, turn around and wave, you know, do silly little things, get the crowd excited, get the crowd behind you, and if you play that, you get to move the Vox Populi up. And then again, remember, the more you move the Vox Populi up, the more the voice of the people is baying for you rather than the blood of you and for the blood of your opponent. The more bonuses you get when you actually come to fight. You get a little plus bonus. Or you can say, I want 2 dudes to fight. But you can't, with very rare exceptions, there are rare circumstances where you can actually move and attack. So you can't just run up and thump somebody. You have to move to position yourself, and then you can attack. You move the gladiator, and then you attack, unless, we'll come to it in a minute. There's some special thing down here. So you can say 2 more gladiators are going to fight, or 1 gladiator is just going to keep thumping. But because it is not murder on the dance floor, the crowd are there to be entertained, not watch butchery, according to the rules. Once you've wounded someone, you can't then hit them again. So people can survive from turn to turn. Basically, once you've caused a wound, you leave a marker showing that they're wounded. You turn the gladiator card around. But if they get wounded a second time, they're out. Or you can cash in your card to draw more cards from your deck. There's only about 12 cards, I think, in your draw deck. And you're holding a number of them. So you've got even fewer than 12 in your draw deck. And your last card, when you get to your last card, you absolutely have to use it to draw more cards, because you can't play, you can never have no cards in your hand. The dice, there's no rolling of dice in this game. When it comes to combat, what happens is you, so let's say these 2 dudes are going to fight each other, the Scissor and the Democharis. They're going to fight each other. Let's say the Scissor is going to be able to thump the Democharis. So the Scissor is a heavy gladiator, and he's going to thump a light gladiator. So for him to attack a heavy gladiator, for him to attack a light gladiator is +2. So he starts off with +2. Let's say Vox Populi, he's, you know, towards the beginning of the track on like a 3. I think it's +1. So he's got +3. And then he has a choice. He can either play 1 card from his hand, which has a dice number. So let's say it's 4, so it's 3 + 4, so he's on a 7. Or if you don't want to play it from your hand, you can pick from the top of your draw deck and just see what number comes up, what dice number comes up on that. That would be a bad one. That would mean you've got nothing to add. So I can't remember what we were on there. He was, I think we said 3 +2 for thumping an agile gladiator and +1 for the Vox Populi being behind him. So he's on 3. And then his defense against, he's a light gladiator, and his defense against a heavy gladiator is +3. So he's on 3. So to draw, nothing happens. I'm such a maths dunce. Those of you watching will have spotted a number of intentional mistakes. The first one being, what you had there was the attacker had +2 for attacking, +1 for the Vox Populi track, that's 3, and then he got 4 on his little dice card because he went for 1 from his hands, that's 7. The defender had +3, and then the defender obviously flips his own card, and I don't know, let's say to keep this even Stevens, you know, that he flips a 4. So he also is on 7, and that would be a draw. But otherwise, it'll be as I now explain. If the dude attacking gets even 1 more, he pushes him back, kind of like in Blood Bowl, and can follow up. If he gets double, he wounds him and can follow up. And if he gets 4 times as much as him, the dude is just out. Now, that doesn't happen very often. What tends to happen is you get someone wounded, and then in the next turn, you go for them again. And with 2 wounds, they bite the dust, as the rules call it. So that's fighting. Or what you can do is you can cash your card in and say, I'm using this to buy one of the super cards. So I end up mostly using the basic deck. But if you were wise, what you would do is there are some extremely good cards, and they've got a number of stars up here on the top left. They're very similar to normal cards, but they are much, much better. And so what you do is you've got to kind of bide your time, get one of these in your deck, and then play it at the opportune moment. But the thing that I found was you always had more dangerous things to worry about, and so these were quite rarely used. But I suppose that's the skill of the game. Or you can read the special ability of the card. Here it says take 2 of the better cards, each with only 1, because some are 1 star, some are 2 star, some are 3 star. And so I managed to get a few of these in my hand through this card. And once you've got them in your hand, up to the total that your Vox Populi allows you, because remember, the further up you are on the Vox Populi chart, the more of these cards you can hold in your hand. And so you can then deploy the better cards at the opportune moment. And that's really all there is to it, and I had a lot of fun. I'm now going to turn to a little bit of an unboxing equivalent, looking at those of my gladiators that I haven't managed to paint yet, of which there are obviously many, and those are largely by Wargames Foundry, who got all of their quite fantastic sculptors to have a bit of a go back in the day, possibly sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, and some by Crusader, which will be the bigger and chunkier ones. And we can try, as a bit of a game, to work out what they are. And I'm open to people piping up afterwards and saying, hey, that's not what he is. So anyway, so this dude, looking at his helmet and his sword, is it's a bit tricky. I mean, I'd say Murmillo. If we give him a big square scutum, he's going to be a Murmillo. This dude I remember being labelled as, I forgot what they're called, but the ones that kind of were sort of chasing beasts. Bestiarius, I think. So we're going to say he's a Bestiarius. This dude, curved sword gives it all away, although he's supposed to have a smaller shield. Fantastic model. So I think we're going to say he's a Thrax. Clearly a Thrax. Here's a female gladiator. Not sure what it's supposed to be. Looking at the helmet, it looks like a Murmillo, but it's a tiny shield, but I guess that could be broken off because probably I put the shield on. So I have no idea what she is, but looking at the helmet, I guess Murmillo. These two are also female gladiators, so that's be these 3 female gladiators. And I have no idea what these are really. Maybe it's just a different gladiator class. I painted those about 20 years ago. He's got a Hoplomachus helmet and a very bent looking sword. Oh no, it's not a bent looking sword, it's a Thrax sword. Look how confusing this all is. So he's got a Thrax sword, but clearly a helmet of a Hoplomachus. So I'm not sure what you'd do. I suppose you just call him a Thrax. This dude has got a Hoplomachus looking helmet. So again, maybe he's lost his spear and his shield. But he looks more kind of like a leader type. I mean, he would be Spartacus, although I'm not sure what kind of gladiator Spartacus actually was. I'm sure someone knows. Thanks, Wikipedia. Let's see what you say. Spartacus, Thracian gladiator. I mean, isn't that a gorgeous shield? Look at that. And what do you reckon he is? He looks clearly like a Murmillo, which suggests that the one based on exactly the same torso is also a Murmillo, because I think back in the day, when all this was green stuff, they would make one model and then cut off various bits and then use green stuff to model some minor variations. Not really sure what that dude is. No, I take it back. It's obvious. He's a Secutor, because he's got that helmet with the 2 small eye slits that's harder to get hold of and means he can't really see properly and can't have a net chucked over him. That dude looks like a Secutor. So same as him. That's obvious. A Democaris. Oops. Not sure what that dude is. No idea. Helmet like a Mamillo. Yeah, probably Mamillo. Curvy. Oops, sorry. Curvy sword. Thrax. Another curvy sword. Thrax. I mean, what am I going to do with all these gladiators? I actually have an idea. There's this skirmish battle set of rules called Clash of Spears, and I'm pretty sure that there's an army list for the Spartacus uprising. And so maybe one day, if I can persuade someone to play it, I could always pull a list together for that. Though I imagine that the gladiators must have got rid of loads of that kit, except for the swords and the shields, because what's the point of a helmet that is designed to obscure your vision? Oh, he looks fantastic, doesn't he? Clearly Mamillo, and I should have given him a bigger shield. Secutor. And here we've got a lion, though I don't think I've seen any rule sets yet that accommodate lions. Sure they'll have other uses. I think we've seen that fellow before, Mamillo. He seems to have quite a lot of hair underneath there, but I think he's also, he looks a bit Mamillo as well. Thrax, we had a look at him as well. He's got that falx, that curved scimitar, and that's a female Democaris. And thank you very much for watching to the end. I think we'll leave it there. Please do like, comment and subscribe. I'm open to any form of feedback, really. It's just great to engage with people and just see how their hobby's going and what they think of how my little hobby is progressing. Keep safe and keep well wherever you are.